The San Diego VA hospital cafeteria hummed with the usual lunchtime chaos. The clatter of trays, the murmur of conversations, the occasional burst of laughter from a corner table where elderly veterans swapped war stories. Marcus Reed navigated his wheelchair through the crowded space with practiced precision, his muscular arms propelling him forward with the same tactical efficiency he'd once used to storm enemy compounds. At 32, he still carried himself like the Navy SEAL he'd been, though the prosthetic legs beneath his jeans told a different story. His eyes scanned the room methodically, taking in details most people missed: the nervous resident doctor fumbling with his coffee, the janitor who moved with the posture of a former Marine, the security guard whose hand rested too casually near his weapon. Old habits died hard. But then his gaze settled on something that made him pause. A young nurse sitting alone at a corner table surrounded by a fortress of patient charts and medical files. Her dark hair pulled back in a practical ponytail, her brow furrowed in intense concentration. Sarah Chen didn't notice him approaching. She was too absorbed in the lab results spread before her, her pen moving rapidly across a notepad as she documented something with meticulous care. Marcus observed her for a moment, the way her lips moved slightly as she read, the determined set of her jaw, the exhaustion evident in the shadows beneath her eyes. He had seen that look before, in the mirror during his darkest days of recovery. It was the face of someone fighting a battle nobody else could see. "Can I sit here?" Marcus asked, his voice carrying the quiet authority of a man who'd once commanded elite warriors in the world's most dangerous places. Sarah's head snapped up, startled. Her eyes widened slightly as she took in his appearance, the Navy SEAL trident pin prominently displayed on his jacket, the wheelchair, the unmistakable outline of prosthetic legs. But what struck Marcus immediately was what he didn't see in her expression. No pity, no uncomfortable shifting, no awkward averting of eyes. Instead, her face softened into a genuine smile. "Of course," she said warmly, gesturing to the empty chair across from her. She quickly gathered her charts into a neater pile, making room. "Please." Marcus transferred smoothly from his wheelchair to the seat, a maneuver he'd performed thousands of times, but one that still drew stares from nearby tables. Sarah didn't stare. She simply waited, then slid a napkin holder closer to his reach with unconscious thoughtfulness. "Busy day?" Marcus asked, nodding toward her mountain of paperwork. Sarah laughed, but there was a tightness around her eyes. "You could say that. I'm relatively new here, transferred from Scripps Memorial about 4 months ago. The VA system's different." "Different how?" Marcus unwrapped his sandwich, genuinely curious. "More bureaucracy, more red tape, but also more purpose," Sarah said, her voice taking on a passionate edge. "These patients, veterans like yourself, you've given everything for this country. Making sure you get the care you deserve, that's not just a job, it's a responsibility." Marcus felt something shift in his chest, a warmth he hadn't experienced in years. That's a rare perspective these days. "My grandfather was a Vietnam veteran," Sarah explained, her fingers absently tracing the edge of her coffee cup. "He didn't get the care he needed when he came home. By the time anyone paid attention, it was too late. I became a nurse partly because of him, and working at the VA, it's like honoring his memory." They talked for 20 minutes, the conversation flowing with unexpected ease. Sarah told him about her challenges adapting to the VA system, the rewarding moments when she could truly help a patient, her frustration with administrative obstacles. Marcus found himself opening up in ways he rarely did, sharing carefully edited stories about his time as a SEAL, his recovery journey, his current work advocating for disabled veterans. But as their conversation continued, Marcus's trained eye caught something that made his instincts flare. Sarah's hospital ID badge hung from a lanyard around her neck, and clipped to it was a small calendar card. Tomorrow's date, November 15th, was circled in red ink with a single word written beside it: evaluation. The way Sarah's hand occasionally drifted to that badge, the tension that crept into her shoulders when she mentioned administrative challenges, the careful way she spoke about discrepancies she'd noticed in medication inventory, it all painted a picture Marcus recognized. This woman was in trouble, whether she fully realized it or not. "Well," Sarah said reluctantly, checking her watch, "I should get back to the floor, but this was really nice. Thank you for the conversation." Marcus reached across the table, gently touching her hand. The gesture surprised both of them. "No," he said with an intensity that made Sarah's eyes widen. "Thank you for your service to veterans, for caring when others don't. It matters more than you know." Sarah blinked, clearly puzzled by the weight of emotion in his voice. You're welcome. It was just lunch." But as Marcus watched her gather her charts and walk away, her ID badge swaying with each step, he knew it was far more than just lunch. Something in his gut, the same instinct that had kept him alive through countless missions, was screaming that this woman was in danger. He pulled out his phone and sent a text to Jake Hawkins, his former teammate who now worked for NCIS. "Need a favor. Urgent. VA hospital situation. Call me ASAP." The reply came within seconds. "On it. Give me 30 minutes." Marcus wheeled himself towards the exit, his mind already shifting into operational mode. He'd asked if he could sit there, and in doing so, he'd stumbled onto something that smelled like corruption. 24 hours, that's all he had before Sarah's evaluation, before whatever trap was waiting for her would spring shut. But Sarah Chen had made one critical mistake. She'd shown kindness to a Navy SEAL who still knew how to fight, and Marcus Reed never left anyone behind. Marcus's apartment was a study of contrasts, sparse and utilitarian like a military barracks, yet decorated with memories of a life that felt like it belonged to someone else. Commendation plaques lined one wall, a folded American flag sat in a shadow box, and photographs of his Navy SEAL team smiled at him from every corner. Brothers he'd bled with, two he'd buried. He transferred from his wheelchair to his desk chair, firing up his laptop as his phone rang. Jake Hawkins' face appeared on the video call, his dark eyes sharp with concern. "Talk to me. Marcus, what's going on?" "I need you to run a background check on a VA nurse named Sarah Chen, works at the San Diego facility, and I need information on the hospital administrator, anything that smells wrong." Jake's fingers were already flying across his keyboard. "What's your concern?" Marcus leaned back, rubbing his jaw. "Call it instinct. She's got an evaluation tomorrow, and something about the whole situation feels off. She mentioned medication discrepancies, inventory issues. She's careful how she talks about it, like she's afraid of being overheard." "You got all that from one lunch conversation?" Jake's eyebrow arched. "You
know how it is. You learn to read people in our line of work." Marcus paused. "She was kind to me, Hawk, not because she had to be, but because that's who she is. If she stumbled into something dangerous..." "You're not leaving her hanging. I know." Jake's expression softened. "Give me 20 minutes, I'll call you back." The wait was excruciating. Marcus wheeled himself to the window, staring out at the San Diego skyline as the sun dipped toward the Pacific. His therapist would say he was projecting, looking for a mission to give his life meaning. Maybe she was right, but that didn't mean Sarah wasn't in real danger. When his phone rang again, Jake's face was grim. "Marcus, you stumbled onto something big. Sarah Chen has been filing internal reports for the past 3 months about medication shortages, specifically high-value pharmaceuticals. Oxycodone, fentanyl patches, morphine. We're talking about drugs that should be going to veterans in severe pain." Marcus's hands clenched into fists. Someone's diverting them. That's what Sarah thinks. But here's where it gets ugly. The hospital administrator is a man named Vincent Drake, former Army supply officer, dishonorable discharge in 2008 for theft of military property. Somehow got himself cleaned up enough to land the VA position 5 years ago. How the hell does someone with a dishonorable discharge end up running a VA hospital? Jake's laugh was bitter. "You know how it works. Connections, paperwork that mysteriously disappears, friends in the right places." I dug deeper. Drake's living way above his pay grade. Waterfront condo in La Jolla, luxury car, kid in private school. His official salary doesn't come close to covering that lifestyle. Marcus felt the familiar cold clarity of a mission coming into focus. "What about Sarah's evaluation tomorrow?" "That's the kicker." Jake's voice dropped. "I accessed the hospital's internal emails. Don't ask me how. Drake has been building a case against Sarah for the past 2 weeks. Falsified incident reports, manufactured complaints from patients she's never even treated, documentation of medication errors that she supposedly made. He's setting her up. Worse than that, tomorrow's evaluation isn't really an evaluation. It's a termination hearing. 3 board members will be there, all people Drake has leverage over. I found financial connections between Drake and 2 of them. Sarah walks into that room, she's not walking out with a job. And once she's discredited and fired, any accusation she makes about the medication theft will look like sour grapes from a disgruntled former employee. Marcus's mind raced through scenarios, calculating angles and possibilities. She has no idea, does she? Probably not. She thinks she's just nervous about a standard performance review. Marcus, there's more. I found records of 2 other nurses who raised similar concerns over the past 3 years. Both were terminated for performance issues. One left the state entirely. The other, I can't locate her. She just vanished from all databases about 6 months after her termination. The implications hung in the air like smoke from a grenade. How big is this operation? Marcus asked quietly. Conservative estimate, based on the medication quantities, Drake's probably moving $2 million worth of drugs annually. He's got a network. Someone in the pharmacy, someone in inventory control, probably security personnel to look the other way. This isn't just one corrupt administrator. It's a conspiracy. Marcus stared at the photographs on his wall. His team, his brothers, the men who died believing their sacrifice meant something. They'd fought to protect people like Sarah, veterans who deserved care, not corruption.
I need your help, Hawk. You know you've got it. What are you thinking? We have 24 hours to take down Drake's entire operation, gather enough evidence to make federal charges stick, and protect Sarah from retaliation. Marcus's voice hardened into command mode. Can you get here tonight? I'm already packing. But Marcus, this is dangerous. Drake has already made people disappear. If he realizes we're onto him, then we don't give him the chance to realize it. We move fast, we move smart, and we finish this before that evaluation tomorrow. Marcus paused. I also need you to contact Commander Patricia Wells at JAG. We need legal authority behind this. The commander who you saved in Kandahar, she still owes you for that. I'm calling in the favor. We need federal warrants, and we need them by morning. Jake was silent for a moment. You're really going all in on this. You barely know this woman. Marcus glanced at the photographs again. Young men in their prime, full of purpose and courage, now frozen in time. She's one of the good ones, Hawk. She's fighting for veterans who can't fight for themselves. I know what it's like to fight alone, to feel like the system is designed to crush you. I won't let that happen to her. All right, brother, I'm in. I'll be there by 2200 hours. After the call ended, Marcus sat in the gathering darkness of his apartment. He thought about Sarah's smile, the passion in her voice when she talked about honoring her grandfather's memory, the meticulous care with which she'd been documenting evidence even as Drake built a trap around her. She'd asked him nothing, expected nothing. She'd simply been kind, because kindness was who she was. And for that, Vincent Drake had marked her for destruction. Marcus reached for his phone and began making calls. His SEAL team might have been scattered across the country, retired from active duty, but they were never truly off the clock, not when one of their own needed them. And somewhere during that cafeteria conversation, Sarah Chin had become one of their own. By midnight, Marcus had assembled a team. By dawn, they'd have a plan. And by the time Sarah walked into that evaluation tomorrow, Vincent Drake's world would be burning down around him. The Navy had taught Marcus many things, but the most important lesson was simple: protect those who cannot protect themselves. Sarah Chin had shown him kindness. Now he would show her what a Navy SEAL's gratitude looked like. The countdown had begun. At precisely 2200 hours, Jake Hawk Hawkins knocked on Marcus's door. 3 sharp raps, the old signal from their team days. Marcus opened it to find not just Jake, but 2 other familiar faces grinning at him from the hallway. You didn't think we'd let you have all the fun, did you? Danny Ghost Martinez stepped inside, his lean frame moving with the silent grace that had earned him his call sign. Behind him came Miguel Doc Ramirez, the team's former medic, carrying a duffel bag that clinked suspiciously. Marcus felt emotion tighten his throat. I didn't ask for a full team. You didn't have to, Ghost said simply. Hawk told us what was happening. Some scumbag is stealing meds from vets and setting up a nurse who actually gives a damn.
Brother, we're exactly where we're supposed to be. They gathered around Marcus's dining table, transforming it into an operational planning center. Within minutes, Jake spread out blueprints of the VA hospital he'd acquired through NCIS channels. Doc opened his bag, revealing not medical supplies, but electronic surveillance equipment. Ghost pulled up security camera layouts on his laptop.
Apparently, some skills from his intelligence days never faded. Commander Wells is flying in at 600, Jake announced. She's bringing federal warrants based on the preliminary evidence I sent her, but she needs more, something concrete that'll make the charges ironclad. Marcus leaned over the blueprints, his tactical mind clicking into gear. Then we give her concrete. We need to prove Drake is actively diverting medications, document his network, and gather evidence that'll stand up in federal court, all before Sarah's evaluation at 1300 hours. That's 17 hours, Doc observed, to infiltrate a secured hospital, gather evidence on a multi-million-dollar criminal operation, and not tip off Drake or his people that were coming. We've done harder missions with less time, Ghost said. Remember Kabul 2019? We had 12 hours to extract those diplomats from... This is different, Marcus interrupted. In Kabul, if things went sideways, we could fight our way out. Here, we're on American soil dealing with federal regulations and chain of custody. Everything has to be by the book, or Drake walks and Sarah's career is destroyed anyway. Jake nodded, which is why we need someone on the inside, someone Drake won't suspect. All eyes turned to Marcus. You want me to go undercover as a patient, Marcus said. It wasn't a question. You're a disabled veteran. You have legitimate medical needs related to your prosthetics. Drake won't look twice at you. You're exactly the kind of patient the VA sees every day. Jake traced a route on the blueprint. We admit you through the ER at 700 with complications from your prosthetics, phantom pain, fitting issues, whatever Doc thinks will be convincing. That gets you into the system. Doc was already nodding. I can coach you on symptoms. Once you're admitted, you'll have access to patient areas, the pharmacy corridor, places where civilians can't go. You can observe the medication handling procedures, identify Drake's people. Meanwhile, Ghost added, I'll be in the parking lot running signals intelligence. I've already hacked into the hospital's wireless network. Every phone call Drake makes, every email he sends, I'll intercept it. Doc will be monitoring police and hospital security frequencies in case Drake tries to call an outside muscle. And I'll be coordinating with Commander Wells and building the legal case in real time, Jake finished. Every piece of evidence you gather, I'll ensure it's properly documented and legally obtained. When we move on Drake, it'll be airtight. Marcus studied the blueprint, visualizing the operation. What about Sarah? She can't know what's happening. If she acts differently tomorrow, if she shows any awareness that something's up, Drake will know. The room fell silent. It was Ghost who finally spoke. So we protect her without her knowledge. We gather the evidence, spring the trap, and she doesn't know until it's over. She'll be terrified walking into that evaluation, Marcus said quietly, thinking she's about to lose everything she's worked for. Better terrified for a few hours than dead, Jake said bluntly. Marcus, I'm serious about this. The nurse who disappeared, I found her. Or rather, I found what was left of her. Body pulled from Mission Bay 3 months after her termination. Officially ruled a suicide, but the evidence was sketchy at best. Drake doesn't just destroy careers, he destroys people. The weight of that revelation settled over the room. Marcus's jaw clenched so hard his teeth ached. Then we make sure he never gets the chance with Sarah, he said with cold finality. Let's go through this step by step. Doc, what symptoms am I presenting with? For the next 3 hours, they refined the operation with the precision of the special operators they'd once been. Doc coached Marcus on presenting convincing symptoms of prosthetic complications. Ghost mapped out Drake's daily routine based on security footage from the past week. Jake coordinated with Commander Wells, who confirmed she'd have federal warrants ready by 900 hours. At 200 hours, Doc pulled out a small device from his bag, a button camera disguised as a military challenge coin. Wear this on your jacket. It'll record everything and transmit to Ghost's receiver. Audio and video admissible in court. Drake's office is on the 3rd floor, administrative wing, Ghost said, highlighting it on the blueprint. Security is lighter there than in patient areas because they don't expect threats from inside. If you can get close enough, even just wheel past his office, we might catch him in the act. What about his phone records? Marcus asked. Jake smiled grimly. Already subpoenaed through Commander Wells. We'll have them by 800 hours. If Drake's been communicating with buyers for the stolen meds, we'll know. Gentlemen,
Marcus said, looking at each of his brothers in turn. "I know you all have lives, jobs, families. You didn't have to drop everything for this." "Marcus," Doc said quietly, "you took shrapnel meant for me in Helmand Province. You think I forgot that? You think any of us forgot?" "Besides," Ghost added with a dark grin, "it's been too long since we got to take down bad guys. I was getting soft working IT security." Jake stood, placing his hand on Marcus's shoulder. "We leave no one behind." That was the team motto. Sarah might not know it yet, but she's under our protection now. Drake's about to find out what happens when you mess with people a SEAL team has decided to defend. They synchronized watches. The plan was set. At 700 hours, Marcus would enter the VA hospital as a patient. By 1300 hours, when Sarah walked into her evaluation, they would either have enough evidence to destroy Vincent Drake's operation, or they would have failed. Failure wasn't an option. As his team finally departed to grab a few hours of sleep, Marcus sat alone in the darkness, thinking about Sarah's face across the cafeteria table. Her dedication, her courage, her unwavering commitment to veterans who'd given everything. She'd served them with honor. Tomorrow, he'd return the favor. Marcus checked his prosthetics one final time, then transferred to his bed. Sleep came easier than it had in years. For the first time since losing his legs, since watching his brothers die, he had a mission that mattered. And Marcus Reed never failed a mission. Marcus wheeled himself through the VA hospital's automatic doors at precisely 7:15 hours, his face carefully composed into an expression of discomfort. Doc had coached him well. The slight grimace, the way he favored his left side, the beads of sweat on his forehead despite the cool morning air. To anyone watching, he was just another veteran struggling with the aftermath of war. "Severe phantom pain and prosthetic malfunction," he told the intake nurse, his voice tight. "It's been getting worse all night." Within 30 minutes, he was admitted to the orthopedic wing, 3rd floor, exactly where he needed to be. The button camera on his jacket was already recording, transmitting everything to Ghost's surveillance man in the parking lot. Meanwhile, across town, Sarah Chin stood in front of her bathroom mirror trying to calm her racing heart. Her evaluation was in 5 hours. She'd reviewed her patient charts 3 times, prepared her defense against any possible criticism, organized all her documentation about the medication discrepancies, but something felt wrong. The text message from Drake's assistant had been oddly formal, clinical. "Please bring all personal items from your locker. Standard protocol for evaluations." Standard protocol, Sarah had asked 3 other nurses. None of them had been required to do that for their evaluations. Her hands trembled as she applied lipstick. "It's just nerves," she whispered to her reflection. But her grandfather's voice echoed in her memory. "Trust your gut, little one. It kept me alive in Vietnam." At the hospital, Marcus was being examined by a physician's assistant who looked barely old enough to shave. As the young man checked his prosthetics, Marcus's eyes tracked every detail of the corridor outside. At 8:47, he saw him, Vincent Drake, striding down the hallway like he owned the place. Expensive suit, Rolex catching the fluorescent light, phone pressed to his ear. "By 1300 hours, at the latest," Drake was saying, "once she's terminated, the paper trail disappears with her. No, I don't care about her documentation. Who's going to believe a disgraced nurse with fabricated evidence?" Marcus's jaw tightened. The button camera was capturing every word. Ghost's voice crackled in the nearly invisible earpiece Marcus wore. "Got it. Audio is crystal clear. Jake's already forwarding it to Commander Wells." At 1100 hours, Commander Patricia Wells arrived at the federal building downtown with 2 NCIS agents and enough evidence to make a prosecutor salivate. Jake had worked through the night, building a case that connected Drake to a network of black market pharmaceutical dealers across 3 states. Phone records, financial transactions, testimonies from Drake's co-conspirators who Jake had quietly approached with immunity deals. But they needed one more piece. Proof that Drake was actively moving medications today, right now. They needed to catch him in the act. Marcus saw his opportunity at 11:45 hours. A coded announcement over the hospital intercom, meaningless to most people, but Marcus recognized it as the pattern Ghost had identified. Drake signaled to his pharmacy accomplice. Claiming he needed to stretch his legs, Marcus wheeled himself toward the administrative wing. A security guard looked at him twice, but the wheelchair and Navy SEAL pin were the perfect camouflage. What threat could a disabled veteran possibly pose? Drake's office door was slightly ajar. Through the gap, Marcus could see Drake stuffing prescription bottles into a briefcase, medications that should have been secured in the pharmacy. His phone was on speaker. "The shipment goes out tonight," Drake said. "Same marina, same boat. Payment in cash like always. After today, we'll be clear. The Chen problem will be solved permanently." Permanently! The words sent ice through Marcus's veins. He just threatened her life. Ghost hissed in his ear. "Marcus, we have everything. Get out of there." But Marcus was already moving. He'd seen enough combat to know when a threat was immediate. Drake wasn't just planning to fire Sarah, he was planning something worse. At 12:45 hours, Sarah walked into the hospital, her stomach churning with dread. Colleagues avoided her eyes. Her mentor, Dr. Patricia Morrison, pulled her aside in the hallway. "Sarah, I don't know what's happening, but something isn't right about this evaluation. Drake's been in meetings all morning with board members who have questionable reputations." Sarah's blood ran cold. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying be careful, and whatever happens in there, know that some of us believe in you." At 12:55 hours, Sarah stood outside the conference room, her hand on the door handle. Inside, she could hear voices, Drake's smooth baritone, the murmur of the board members. This was it, the moment that would define her career, possibly her life. She thought of her grandfather, of the veterans she'd fought to protect, of the medication discrepancies she documented even when everyone told her to let it go. If this was the end, at least she'd gone down fighting. Sarah pushed open the door. The conference room was exactly as she'd feared. Drake at the head of the table, 3 stone-faced board members flanking him, a stack of files with her name on them spread across the polished wood. The late afternoon sun slanted through the windows, making Drake's smile look predatory. "Miss Chen," Drake said, his voice dripping with false warmth, "please sit down. We have much to discuss." Sarah took the seat directly across from him, her hands folded in her lap to hide their shaking. She could see it in his eyes. Triumph, certainty, the look of a man who'd already won. "As you know, this is your 90-day evaluation," Drake continued, opening the top file. "Unfortunately, we've discovered some serious concerns about your performance." He slid a document across the table. Sarah's eyes widened as she read. A patient complaint alleging she'd administered the wrong medication, nearly causing a fatal reaction. But she'd never even treated this patient. The name was unfamiliar. The date was a day she'd been off duty. "This is falsified," Sarah said, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "I wasn't even working that day." "Are you calling the patient a liar?" Board member Carlson asked, his tone sharp. "I'm saying this didn't happen." Drake slid another document across, then another, each one a manufactured incident, a fabricated complaint, a lie wrapped in official paperwork. Sarah felt the walls closing in. He'd built an entire false narrative, and she had no way to prove it was fake. "The board has reviewed your case extensively," Drake said, reaching for a termination letter, "and we've unanimously decided." The conference room doors exploded open. Commander Patricia Wells strode in, flanked by 4 NCIS agents in full tactical gear, their weapons drawn. Behind them came Jake Hawkins holding a tablet displaying video evidence. And then Sarah's heart stopped. Marcus Reed wheeled through the door, his Navy SEAL pin gleaming, his face set in an expression of controlled fury. But he wasn't looking at Drake. He was looking at her. And in his eyes, Sarah saw something that made her breath catch. Protection, determination, and something deeper she couldn't name. "Vincent Drake," Commander Wells announced, "you are under arrest for conspiracy to defraud the United States Veterans Administration, theft of federal property, racketeering, and witness intimidation. NCIS, secure the suspects." Drake's face went white, then purple with rage. "You can't! This is a mistake! I have rights!" "You have the right to remain silent," Jake said coldly, snapping handcuffs onto Drake's wrists. "I suggest you use it." The board members were being cuffed as well, their expressions ranging from shock to terror. Carlson was actually crying. Sarah sat frozen, unable to process what was happening. It couldn't be real. It had to be a dream, a hallucination brought on by stress. Marcus wheeled to her side, his hand gently touching hers. "You're safe now," he said quietly. "It's over." What? How? Sarah couldn't form complete sentences. Commander Wells approached, her expression softening. "Ms. Chen, thanks to evidence gathered over the past 18 hours, we've dismantled a criminal operation that's been stealing from veterans for nearly 5 years. Your
Documentation was crucial. It gave us the foundation we needed. You were right about everything." 18 hours? Sarah's mind reeled. "But I just met him yesterday. We had lunch. I don't understand." Marcus squeezed her hand. "You showed kindness to a stranger. That stranger happened to be someone who still knows how to fight. When I saw your evaluation date, when I learned what Drake was planning," his voice hardened, "let's just say I made some calls." Jake held up the tablet, showing Sarah the footage. Drake stuffing medications into his briefcase. Drake's phone conversations threatening her life. Financial records showing millions in stolen medications. Evidence so overwhelming that Drake's attorney would probably advise an immediate guilty plea. "He was going to kill me," Sarah whispered, the reality finally sinking in. "After he fired me, he was going to—" "He's never going to hurt anyone again," Marcus said firmly. "I promise you that." As NCIS agents led Drake away in handcuffs, he locked eyes with Marcus one final time. "You have no idea who you're messing with," Drake snarled. "I have connections, lawyers, friends, and—" "You have nothing," Marcus interrupted, his voice cold as Arctic ice. "You stole from the men and women who sacrificed everything for this country. You threatened a woman whose only crime was caring too much. You're done." And as Drake was dragged from the room, still protesting, still threatening, Sarah finally understood. The man who'd asked to sit with her in the cafeteria hadn't just been making conversation, he'd been saving her life. The conference room emptied quickly, NCIS agents escorting Drake and the corrupt board members away, their protests echoing down the corridor until the heavy security doors cut them off. Commander Wells conferred quietly with Jake near the window, organizing the evidence for federal prosecutors. Ghost and Doc appeared briefly, nodded to Marcus, then vanished like the operators they'd always been. Sarah sat motionless, her hands gripping the edge of the conference table as if it were the only solid thing in a world that had just turned upside down. Her mind struggled to piece together the impossible timeline. 24 hours ago, she'd been eating lunch alone. Now, a criminal conspiracy had been dismantled around her like a controlled demolition. Marcus wheeled closer, giving her space, but staying near enough that she could reach him if she needed to. He recognized shock when he saw it, worn that same expression in the hospital bed at Walter Reed when they told him about his legs. "Sarah," he said gently, "breathe. You're safe now." She turned to him, her eyes wide and glistening with unshed tears. "You did this in one day? How? Why?" Her voice cracked. "You didn't even know me." Marcus was quiet for a moment, choosing his words carefully. "Yesterday, when I asked if I could sit with you, I was having a bad day. Anniversary of the mission where I lost my legs, lost my brothers. I almost didn't leave my apartment." He paused, his throat tight. "But something made me go to the hospital cafeteria, and there you were." "I was just having lunch," Sarah whispered. "No, you were carrying the weight of something dangerous, something you couldn't talk about. I saw it in your eyes. The same look I've seen in operators behind enemy lines who know they're compromised, but keep pushing forward anyway." Marcus leaned forward, "And when you spoke to me, you didn't see a broken veteran. You saw a person. Do you know how rare that is?" Sarah's tears finally spilled over. "So you, called in the entire federal government because I was nice to you?" "I noticed your evaluation date on your badge. My instincts said something was wrong." Marcus's expression hardened. "One phone call to my buddy at NCIS confirmed it. Drake wasn't just corrupt. He was building a trap to destroy you. And based on what happened to the last nurse who crossed him," he didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. The implications hit Sarah like a physical blow. The nurse who disappeared, Amanda Richardson, she tried to report medication theft 2 years ago. Sarah's hand flew to her mouth. "Oh God, he killed her, didn't he?" Commander Wells approached her, face grave. "We're reopening that investigation based on Drake's communications from this morning, communications Mr. Reed's team intercepted. There's strong evidence her death wasn't suicide." She placed a gentle hand on Sarah's shoulder. "You would have been next if Marcus hadn't acted when he did." Sarah looked at Marcus with something between gratitude and disbelief. "You saved my life. You saved my career.
And I still don't understand why. Jake joined them, pulling up a chair. Maybe I can help explain. Marcus here, he's the guy who carried 3 wounded teammates 2 miles through enemy territory with both legs shattered. The guy who refused evacuation until every member of his team was accounted for. The guy who spent 6 months in recovery and another year in physical therapy, then immediately started advocating for disabled veterans because he couldn't stand the thought of brothers suffering while bureaucrats counted pennies. Jake, Marcus started, uncomfortable. No, she needs to hear this, Jake continued. When Marcus calls and says someone needs help, we don't ask questions. We suit up because we know if Marcus Reed thinks you're worth fighting for, you damn well are. Sarah wiped her tears, a laugh bubbling up through the emotion. I gave you half my sandwich and listened to you talk for 20 minutes. That's not heroic. That's just human decency. Exactly, Marcus said softly. Human decency. You'd be surprised how rare that's become, especially in systems designed to help people. You weren't just doing your job, Sarah. You were risking everything to protect veterans who couldn't protect themselves. You documented evidence for months, knowing it could cost you your career. That's not duty, that's courage. I was terrified, Sarah admitted. Every day I thought Drake would find out what I was collecting. I thought I was going crazy, that maybe I was wrong about the medication numbers, that you weren't wrong. Commander Wells opened a folder, spreading documents across the table. Your documentation was meticulous. Dates, times, quantities, discrepancies down to the milligram. Without this foundation, we wouldn't have known where to look. You built the case, Sarah. We just finished it. Sarah stared at her own handwriting on the pages, months of careful notes taken during lunch breaks and after shifts, cross-referenced against pharmacy logs and patient records. She'd thought it was futile, that one nurse couldn't take down a corrupt administrator with powerful connections. She'd been wrong. Drake moved over $2 million in stolen medications, Jake explained, pulling up financial records on his tablet. Opioids meant for veterans in chronic pain, sold to dealers who put them on the streets. We've identified his entire network. Pharmacy techs bribed, inventory managers he threatened, even the boat captain who smuggled the drugs to buyers in Mexico. 2 million? Sarah repeated numbly. That's how many veterans didn't get pain medication they needed. How many suffered because of his greed? Too many, Marcus said hard, but not anymore. Drake's looking at 20 to 30 years in federal prison. His co-conspirators are already negotiating plea deals, and the VA is implementing new oversight protocols based on your recommendations. Sarah's head snapped up. My recommendations? Commander Wells smiled. The documentation you provided didn't just expose the crime, it showed us how to prevent it from happening again. Randomized inventory audits, dual signature requirements for controlled substances, anonymous reporting channels. The VA secretary himself reviewed your work. They're calling it the Chen Protocol. I don't know what to say. Say you'll accept the formal apology the hospital board, the real hospital board, wants to give you, Jake suggested. Say you'll consider the promotion to head of nursing they're offering. Say you'll testify when Drake goes to trial. Sarah looked at Marcus, her eyes searching his face. Yesterday morning, I almost quit. I was so tired of fighting, so sure that nothing I did mattered. I thought about walking away, finding a quiet job somewhere where I wouldn't have to see suffering every day. What changed? Marcus asked. You sat down at my table, Sarah said simply. A stranger who'd lost so much, who'd survived hell, and he was still kind, still fighting. If you could keep going after everything you'd been through, she took a shaky breath. It reminded me why I became a nurse in the first place. Marcus reached across the table and took her hand. The gesture was familiar now, comfortable. My team leader used to say that the most important battles aren't always fought with guns. Sometimes they're fought by people who refuse to give up when everything tells them they should. Your team leader sounds wise. He was. He died in the same explosion that took my legs. Marcus's voice was steady, but Sarah saw the old pain flicker in his eyes. I spent a long time thinking I should have died with him, that surviving when better men didn't was some kind of cosmic mistake. And now? Sarah asked softly. Marcus looked at her, really looked at her, and something shifted in his expression. Now, I think maybe I survived for a reason. Maybe it was so I'd be in that cafeteria yesterday. Maybe it was so I could help someone who deserved it. He paused. Maybe it was so I could meet you. The air between them changed, charged with something neither was quite ready to name. Commander Wells and Jake exchanged knowing glances and quietly excused themselves, suddenly very interested in paperwork across the room. "Marcus," Sarah began, then stopped, unsure how to express the tangle of emotions flooding through her. "I don't know how to thank you. You assembled a team of federal agents and former special operations soldiers in one night for a nurse you just met." "You're not just a nurse," Marcus said firmly. "You're someone who stands up when it's easier to look away. Someone who fights for people who can't fight for themselves. Someone who—" He stopped, a rare vulnerability crossing his face. "Someone who made me remember what it feels like to care about something beyond just surviving to the next day." Sarah's breath caught in his eyes. She saw the truth he wasn't quite saying, that this wasn't just about justice or protecting a witness. Somewhere in the past 24 hours, between her kindness and his intervention, between danger and rescue, something profound had sparked between them. "The evaluation," Sarah said suddenly, then laughed, slightly hysterical, completely overwhelmed. "I was so terrified of losing my job, and instead, you exposed a criminal conspiracy, saved countless veterans from having their medication stolen, and became a hero," Marcus finished. "Not a bad day's work." "Not a bad day's work," Sarah echoed. Then, impulsively, she stood and moved around the table, wrapping her arms around Marcus in a fierce hug. He stiffened for just a moment. Physical contact still sometimes caught him off guard, then relaxed into it, his arms coming up to hold her close. "Thank you," Sarah whispered against his shoulder, "for seeing me, for believing me, for caring when you had every reason not to." Marcus closed his eyes, breathing in the moment, the first genuine embrace he'd accepted in 3 years. "Thank you for reminding me why the fight matters." They stayed like that for a long moment. Two warriors who'd found each other in the chaos, neither quite ready to let go. Outside, Jake nudged Commander Wells. $20 says they're married within a year. Wells smiled. "No bet. I've seen that look before. Those two just don't know it yet." 3 weeks after Drake's arrest, the VA hospital transformed. News crews had finally left, federal investigators had completed their initial sweep, and the hallways buzzed with a different energy. Hope instead of fear, transparency instead of whispered suspicions. Sarah stood in the newly renovated medication dispensary, watching as pharmacists implemented the Chen protocol's dual signature system. Every controlled substance now required 2 independent verifications, digital timestamps, and randomized audits. What Drake had corrupted in darkness now operated in complete transparency. Dr. Chen, a young pharmacy tech, approached nervously. "I just wanted to say thank you. My brother is a Marine vet. He couldn't get his pain medication for months last year. We thought the VA just didn't care, but now we know someone was stealing it. You gave him his medicine back. You gave him his dignity back." Sarah's eyes misted. "I'm not a doctor, just a nurse," the tech said simply, then returned to work. Sarah hadn't adjusted to that word yet. Hero. She'd simply done what was right, what her grandfather would have wanted. But the hospital staff treated her differently now, with a reverence that made her uncomfortable. Job offers arrived daily from hospitals across the country. The VA secretary himself had called to thank her. Everything had changed. Her phone buzzed. A text from Marcus. "Coffee. Same cafeteria table." Sarah smiled, grabbing her jacket. Some changes were better than others. She found him already there, 2 cups of coffee waiting, his wheelchair positioned at the exact spot where everything had started. The early December sun streamed through the windows, making his Navy SEAL pin glint like it did that first day. "You're predictable," Sarah said, sliding into her seat. "Creatures of habit," Marcus replied, pushing her coffee across. "How's the transition to head of nursing?" "Terrifying, overwhelming, amazing." Sarah wrapped her hands around the warm cup. "I have actual authority now to implement changes, a real budget, a team that believes in the mission." She paused. "It's everything I hoped for, and it scares me to death." Marcus understood that fear, the weight of responsibility, the terror of failing people they depended on. "You'll be brilliant. You already are," says the man who orchestrated a federal takedown in 18 hours. "Team effort," Marcus said, but his smile was genuine. Over the past 3 weeks, they'd fallen into an easy rhythm. Coffee twice a week, occasional dinners, long phone conversations that stretched past midnight. Nothing formally romantic, but something deeper than simple friendship building between them. Sarah studied him over her coffee. "How are you really doing with everything?" Marcus knew what she meant. The operation had stirred up old memories, mission planning, tactical coordination, the adrenaline rush of executing a perfect op. It reminded him of who he'd been before the explosion, before the ambush, before the wheelchair.
Wheelchair, before the loss. "Some days are harder than others," he admitted. "My therapist says I'm using you as a distraction from processing my trauma." He smiled wryly. I told her maybe some distractions are worth having. And what did she say? She said, as long as I'm not avoiding my feelings, healthy connections are part of healing. Marcus's expression grew serious. "Sarah, I need to tell you something. The past 3 weeks spending time with you, I haven't felt this alive in years, but I'm still broken in a lot of ways. The PTSD doesn't just disappear. Some nights I can't sleep. Loud noises still make me reach for weapons that aren't there. I have survivor's guilt that drowns me some days." Sarah reached across the table, taking his hand. "Marcus, I work in a VA hospital. I know what PTSD looks like. You're not broken. You're healing. There's a difference." "Is there?" The question carried years of self-doubt. "Yes, broken things can't grow. You've grown so much just in the time I've known you." Sarah squeezed his hand. "You assembled a team to save someone you barely knew. You've been helping me navigate this new position, introducing me to veteran advocacy groups, sharing your expertise. That's not a broken man. That's a man who's finding new ways to serve." Marcus felt something crack open in his chest. Not breaking, but opening. "My fiancée left me during recovery. She said she couldn't handle what I'd become, that I wasn't the man she'd fallen in love with anymore." "Then she didn't deserve you," Sarah said fiercely. "The man you've become, someone who fights for others despite his own pain, who turns suffering into purpose, that's the man worth loving." The word hung between them. Loving. Neither had said it explicitly before. "Sarah," Marcus began, his voice rough with emotion. Her phone exploded with buzzing, then his. Simultaneously, they both grabbed their devices, reading the breaking news alert that flooded their screens. Sarah's face went pale as she read. "Former VA administrator found dead in federal custody. Vincent Trey, apparent suicide in holding cell." "No," Sarah whispered. "No, that's not possible. He was under federal protection, awaiting trial. How could he—" Marcus's training kicked in immediately, his mind analyzing possibilities. He couldn't. Not in federal custody. Not without help. His phone rang. Jake's name flashed on the screen. Marcus answered, putting it on speaker. "Tell me this wasn't suicide," Marcus said without preamble. "It wasn't suicide." Jake's voice was tight. "Marcus Drake was murdered, made to look like hanging, but the coroner found evidence of strangulation before the ligature was applied. Someone got to him in federal lockup." Sarah's hand flew to her mouth. Someone wanted him dead before trial, before he could testify about his network. "Exactly," Jake confirmed. "Drake wasn't the top of the food chain, he was middle management, and whoever runs this operation just eliminated their liability." Marcus felt the old combat instinct surge, which means Sarah's still in danger. If they kill Drake to keep him quiet, they'll kill anyone else who knows too much. "We're already moving on it," Jake said. "Commander Wells is arranging protective detail. Marcus, get Sarah somewhere secure now. I'll call you with instructions in 20 minutes. The line went dead. Sarah and Marcus stared at each other across the cafeteria table where they'd first met, where everything had started. The moment crystallized. Danger, connection, the sudden realization that their story was far from over. "I thought it was finished," Sarah said, her voice small. "I thought we were safe." Marcus wheeled around the table, positioning himself beside her, his presence solid and reassuring. "We will be, but right now we need to move. Trust me." Sarah looked into his eyes, those steady, determined eyes that had promised her protection once before and delivered. She nodded. "With my life." "Then let's go." Marcus took her hand. "My apartment is secure. We'll regroup there, wait for Jake's call, and figure out our next move."
As they hurried toward the exit, Sarah realized something profound. 3 weeks ago, Marcus had saved her from one threat. Now he was doing it again. But somewhere along the way, she'd started saving him, too. From isolation, from despair, from the belief that he had nothing left to offer the world. They'd saved each other, and they weren't done fighting yet. Outside, dark clouds gathered over San Diego, and somewhere in the shadows, someone watched the VA hospital with cold, calculating eyes. Drake had been a tool, nothing more, easily replaced, easily disposed of. But the nurse and the SEAL, they were becoming a problem that would need to be solved permanently. Marcus's phone buzzed again as they reached his truck, a text from an unknown number. Let it go. Drake's death was a message. Walk away while you still can. Marcus showed Sarah the message. She read it, her face hardening with resolve. "What do we do?" she asked. Marcus deleted the text, his jaw set with the same determination that had carried him through countless missions. We do what we do best. We fight back. Sarah nodded, sliding into the passenger seat. As Marcus drove them away from the hospital, she realized that whatever came next, they'd face it together. The cafeteria conversation had started this, but how it ended was still unwritten, and Sarah Chen had never been one to leave a story unfinished. Marcus's apartment became a war room within an hour. Jake arrived with Commander Wells and 2 NCIS agents, transforming the living space into a secure operations center. Laptops glowed on every surface, encrypted phones buzzed with incoming intelligence, and Sarah found herself at the center of a protection detail she never imagined needing. Drake's phone records from prison show 3 calls to a blocked number in the 12 hours before his death, Jake explained, spreading printouts across Marcus's dining table. We traced it to a burner phone that pings towers near the federal building, then went dark permanently. Inside job, Marcus said grimly. Someone with access to federal facilities, someone Drake trusted enough to call. Commander Wells nodded. We're investigating every guard, administrator, and contractor who had access to that wing. But whoever did this is professional. They knew how to avoid cameras, how to make it look authentic. Sarah sat on Marcus's couch, her coffee untouched, processing the impossible reality. Drake said he had connections, friends in high places. I thought he was just trying to scare me. He wasn't lying. Jake pulled up financial records on his laptop. We've been digging deeper into the medication theft network. Drake was moving $2 million annually, but the distribution chain suggests something much larger. We're talking about a multi-state operation, possibly connected to other VA hospitals. How many others? Marcus asked, his tactical mind already calculating scope and scale. We've identified irregularities at 7 VA facilities across California, Nevada, and Arizona. Similar patterns. Medication shortages, falsified records, administrators with unexplained wealth. Commander Wells's expression was grave. Drake wasn't running this operation. He was a regional manager in something much bigger. The weight of that revelation settled over the room. Sarah had thought exposing Drake would end the corruption. Instead, she'd barely scratched the surface. "So what do we do?"
asked, her voice steady despite her fear. "Hide? Run? Pretend I never saw anything?" Marcus wheeled to her side, his hand finding hers. "We finish what you started. We expose the entire network and make sure no other veteran suffers because of these people's greed." "That's asking Sarah to put herself in even more danger," one of the NCIS agents objected. "With Drake dead, she's the prosecution's star witness. If the people behind this want to protect their operation, Anyway," Sarah interrupted, "whether I cooperate or not, at least if I fight back, I have a chance to stop them." Jake studied her with new respect. "You understand what you're signing up for. Federal protection, possibly relocation, months of depositions and testimony, living with a target on your back." "My grandfather didn't get a choice when they sent him to Vietnam," Sarah said quietly. "He did his duty anyway. This is mine." Marcus felt something shift in his chest. Pride, admiration, and something deeper he was finally ready to acknowledge. This woman, who'd shown him kindness in a cafeteria 3 weeks ago, had more courage than most soldiers he'd served with.
Commander Wells made a decision. "All right, we do this properly, Sarah. You'll work with our investigators to identify every document, every piece of evidence you collected. We'll coordinate with VA facilities nationwide, implement the Chin Protocol everywhere simultaneously, and cut off their supply chain at the source." "What about the people at the top?" Marcus asked. "The ones who ordered Drake's hit." "We draw them out," Jake said, a dangerous smile crossing his face. "Sarah becomes bait." "Absolutely not," Marcus said immediately, his voice sharp. "It's the only way," Sarah countered, standing to face him. "If they think I'm vulnerable, unprotected, they'll make a move. And when they do, we'll be waiting," Jake finished. "Full surveillance, armed backup, controlled environment. We've done this before, Marcus. We know how to protect assets." "She's not an asset," Marcus said fiercely. "She's—" He stopped, the words catching in his throat. Sarah's eyes softened. She understood what he couldn't yet say. "I'm someone worth protecting, I know, and I trust you to do that. But I'm also someone who won't hide while veterans keep suffering." The next 3 days blurred into intensive planning. Sarah worked with federal prosecutors, providing detailed testimony about Drake's operation. She collaborated with VA administrators to implement emergency oversight protocols. Media outlets ran her story, the nurse who took down corruption, and suddenly, Sarah Chen became a national figure. Meanwhile, Marcus coordinated security with his old team. Ghost set up surveillance around Sarah's apartment in the hospital. Doc trained Sarah in basic situational awareness and threat detection. Jake monitored communications for any sign of the organization making a move. But it was the quiet moments that Marcus treasured most. Late nights when the investigators had left, when he and Sarah sat together reviewing documents, their hands occasionally brushing, their conversations drifting from strategy to personal dreams. "When this is over," Sarah said one night, her head resting on Marcus's shoulder as they reviewed testimony prep, "what will you do?" Marcus was quiet for a long moment. "I've been thinking about that. Before I met you, I was just existing, going through the motions. But these past few weeks, having a mission again, having someone to fight for." He turned to look at her. "I want to build something permanent, something that helps veterans long term." "Like what? A rehabilitation center?" "Not just physical therapy, but comprehensive care, mental health, job training, community support. A place where veterans can heal completely, not just survive." His eyes lit up with genuine excitement. "I have the connections, the experience, the understanding of what's needed. I just never had the courage to try." "And now?" Sarah asked softly. "Now I have a reason to be brave." Marcus took her hand, intertwining their fingers. "Sarah, I need to tell you something. That first day in the cafeteria, I was planning my suicide. I had the pills at home, the note written. I decided that night was the end." Sarah's breath caught, tears instantly filling her eyes. "But then you smiled at me. You talked to me like I mattered. You gave me a reason to wake up the next morning." Marcus's voice cracked with emotion. "You saved my life before I ever saved yours. You just didn't know it." Sarah pulled him close, holding him as tightly as she could. "I'm falling in love with you," he whispered against her hair. "I know it's fast, I know it's complicated, but I can't pretend anymore. You're not just someone I protected. You're someone I want beside me for whatever comes next." Sarah pulled back just enough to cup his face in her hands. "I love you too. I think I started falling that first day, watching you talk about veteran advocacy with such passion. You were broken and beautiful and brave, and I wanted to know everything about you." Their kiss was inevitable, soft, tentative, perfect. Years of pain and loneliness melted away in that moment, replaced by hope and connection and the terrifying joy of letting someone in completely. When they finally pulled apart, both were crying and smiling simultaneously. "So," Sarah said, wiping her eyes, "when we take down this criminal network and make the world safer for veterans—" "When we do that," Marcus agreed, "we build that rehabilitation center together, the Second Chance Veterans Center. You handle operations, I handle medical care. Partners in every sense." Marcus kissed her again, longer this time, sealing the promise. Partners.
Jake's voice crackled over the radio Marcus kept nearby. "Hate to interrupt whatever's happening in there, but we've got movement. Unknown vehicles circling Sarah's apartment building. Third pass in 20 minutes. Marcus and Sarah sprang apart, instantly shifting into operational mode. The tender moment vanished, replaced by sharp focus. "They're probing defenses," Marcus said, wheeling to the window. "Testing response times. Which means they're planning something soon," Sarah concluded, her nurses calm under pressure, serving her well. Commander Wells burst through the door, phone pressed to her ear. "We just intercepted encrypted communications. There's a hit ordered for tomorrow night. Location, the congressional hearing where Sarah's testifying about VA corruption." Sarah's blood ran cold. "They're going to kill me in front of Congress." "They're going to try," Marcus corrected, his voice hard as steel. "But they're going to fail, because tomorrow night they're walking into our trap." Jake grinned, pulling up building schematics on his laptop. "Time to show these criminals what happens when they threaten people under Navy SEAL protection." Sarah looked at Marcus, her protector, her partner, her unexpected love, and felt fear transform into determination. She'd started this fight to honor her grandfather's memory. Now she'd finish it, not just for him, but for every veteran who deserved better, for Marcus and his fallen brothers, for the future they were building together. Tomorrow night, everything would change again. The congressional hearing room buzzed with anticipation as Sarah took her seat at the witness table. Cameras lined the back wall, senators arranged in a semicircle before her, and somewhere in the crowd sat Marcus, positioned strategically in the center aisle, where his wheelchair gave him clear sight lines to every entrance. But Marcus wasn't alone. Ghost occupied a photographer's position near the press pool, his camera concealing communication equipment. Doc sat disguised as a congressional aide, his medical bag containing considerably more than first aid supplies. Jake coordinated from a command van outside, monitoring every frequency, every camera, every possible threat vector. Sarah's hands trembled slightly as she adjusted her microphone. Somewhere in this room, or waiting outside, was someone sent to silence her permanently. The plan was simple. Let them make their move, then capture them alive and force them to reveal the network's leadership. Simple, terrifying, necessary. "Miss Chen," Senator Harrison began, his voice grave and respectful, "thank you for your courage in coming forward. Please, in your own words, tell us what you discovered at the San Diego VA hospital." Sarah took a breath and began. She spoke of her grandfather, of her commitment to veterans, of the medication discrepancies she'd noticed. She described Drake's operation, the stolen medications, the $2 million diverted from veteran care. Her voice grew stronger as she detailed the Chen protocol, the reforms already saving lives across the VA system. The senators listened, rapt. Some took notes, others simply stared, appalled by the depth of corruption she described. Marcus watched the room with predator focus. A maintenance worker near the side exit, wrong uniform, hands too clean. A woman in the gallery shifting nervously, her purse positioned oddly. A congressional staffer standing too close to Sarah's table, his body language wrong. Then Marcus saw it, the staffer's hand moving slowly toward his jacket, eyes locked on Sarah with cold intent. "Ghost, 3 o'clock from witness table," Marcus whispered into his concealed microphone. Everything happened in seconds. The staffer's hand emerged with a syringe. Poison, Marcus's mind registered instantly. He lunged towards Sarah. Doc moved simultaneously from the opposite direction. Ghost vaulted the press barrier, but Marcus was closest. He launched himself from his wheelchair with explosive force, tackling the staffer mid-stride. They crashed to the marble floor as senators shouted and security converged. The syringe skittered across the floor, its deadly contents spilling harmlessly. Federal agents, Jake's team, burst through every entrance simultaneously, weapons drawn. Nobody move. The maintenance worker ran for the exit, straight into Ghost's arms. The nervous woman in the gallery was subdued by 2 NCIS agents before she could reach for her concealed weapon. Within 90 seconds, the congressional hearing room was secured, 3 suspects in custody. Sarah stood frozen at the witness table, her heart hammering, staring at Marcus on the floor where he'd thrown himself between her and danger without hesitation. "Clear," Jake's voice echoed through the chaos, "all threats neutralized."
Marcus pushed himself up, Ghost helping him back into his wheelchair. Their eyes met across the room, Sarah's wide with shock and gratitude, Marcus's burning with protective intensity and something deeper. "I've got you," Marcus mouthed silently. Sarah's composure finally cracked. Tears streamed down her face as the weight of everything, the danger, the fear, the impossible love blooming in the midst of chaos overwhelmed her completely. 6 months later, Sarah stood in an empty field in North County, San Diego, wind whipping her hair as construction crews prepared the groundwork. Beside her, Marcus studied architectural plans.
Spread across a portable table, his practiced eye catching every detail. "The physical therapy wing goes here," he said, pointing, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the canyon. "Veterans need to see hope, see beauty while they heal." "And the mental health center here," Sarah added, indicating another section. "Private rooms, group therapy spaces, art therapy studios, everything evidence-based, everything focused on whole-person healing." The Second Chances Veterans Center was no longer just a dream. Federal grants, private donations, and Sarah's newfound fame as the nurse who'd exposed VA corruption had provided funding beyond their wildest expectations. Ground would break next week. Ghost approached, now head of security for the center. "Perimeter's looking good. We'll have the most secure veteran facility in the country." "And the most compassionate," Doc added, joining them. He'd left private practice to become the Cent's medical director. Unable to resist the mission. Jake pulled up in his car, Commander Wells in the passenger seat. "Congressional hearing just approved full immunity for the 3 suspects in exchange for testimony. We've got names, locations, the entire network structure. 47 arrests across 9 states, all simultaneous. It's over." Sarah felt Marcus's hand find hers, their fingers interlocking with familiar ease. Over the past 6 months, their relationship had deepened beyond the crisis that sparked it. They'd learned each other's rhythms, Marcus's nightmares and Sarah's anxiety, his fierce protectiveness and her stubborn independence. The way they balanced each other perfectly. "The preliminary trial results are in," Commander Wells said, smiling. "The organization's leadership is going down for decades. Racketeering, murder, conspiracy to defraud the federal government. They'll never hurt another veteran." Marcus pulled Sarah close, pressing a kiss to her temple. "We did it." "No," Sarah corrected, looking around at the team assembled. Ghost, Doc, Jake, Commander Wells, all the people who'd risked everything for justice. "We did it together." 1 year after a disabled Navy SEAL asked if he could sit at a nurse's table, Sarah Chen and Marcus Reed stood before family and friends at a small ceremony overlooking the Pacific Ocean. Sarah wore simple white. Marcus stood on his prosthetics, with Doc's support on one side and Jake's on the other. "I was lost," Marcus said during his vows, his voice thick with emotion. "Drowning in survivor's guilt and pain, convinced I had nothing left to offer the world. Then you smiled at me across a cafeteria table, and everything changed. You gave me purpose. You gave me hope. You gave me a reason to believe in tomorrow." Sarah's tears flowed freely. "I was fighting alone, convinced that one person couldn't make a difference against corruption and greed. Then you showed me what courage really looks like. Not the absence of fear, but the refusal to let fear win. You taught me that sometimes the bravest thing we can do is let someone else fight beside us." They exchanged rings, simple bands engraved with coordinates of that cafeteria table, the place where everything began. "Can I sit here?" Marcus whispered as he slipped the ring onto her finger, echoing his first words to her. Sarah laughed through her tears. "You can stay here forever." The Second Chances Veterans Center opened 18 months after that fateful launch, serving 300 veterans in its first year. Sarah ran medical operations with innovative approaches to chronic pain management that eliminated the medication vulnerabilities Drake had exploited. Marcus led advocacy efforts, testifying before Congress, training VA administrators nationwide, ensuring the Chin Protocol became standard practice everywhere.
But their greatest achievement wasn't the center, the reforms, or the lives saved, though those mattered immensely. Their greatest achievement was proving that from darkness comes light, that from pain comes purpose, that sometimes the most important question we can ask is simple: can I sit here? Because in asking, in opening ourselves to connection when everything tells us to remain isolated, we create possibilities for transformation we never imagined. Marcus had asked if he could sit. Sarah had said yes. And in that moment, that simple, ordinary, extraordinary moment, two broken people began healing each other, began building something beautiful from the ruins of their pain. On the Sense dedication day, they stood together before a plaque bearing the names of Marcus's fallen SEAL brothers and Sarah's grandfather. Warriors who'd sacrificed everything, whose memories inspired everything Marcus and Sarah built. "They'd be proud," Sarah whispered, leaning into Marcus's embrace. "They are," Marcus replied, his arm tight around her waist. "Wherever they are, they know their sacrifice mattered, that we're making sure no veteran is forgotten, no veteran suffers alone." A young Marine veteran approached, recently admitted to the Sense PTSD program. "Excuse me," he said hesitantly. "Are you the people who started this place?" Marcus and Sarah glanced, the same glance they'd shared 100 times, communication flowing wordlessly between them. "We are," Sarah said warmly. "What's your name?" "Corporal James Mitchell. Ma'am, I wanted to say thank you. I was planning to kill myself next week. Then I heard about this place, about what you're doing for vets, and I thought maybe there's still hope." Marcus wheeled forward, extending his hand. "There's always hope, Corporal, always. We're proof of that." As the young Marine walked away towards treatment, towards healing, towards his own second chance, Sarah knelt beside Marcus's wheelchair, her head on his shoulder. "We're doing it," she said softly. "We're actually making a difference." "We always were," Marcus replied, kissing the top of her head. "From the moment you let a broken SEAL sit at your table, you just didn't know it yet." The sun set over the Pacific, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and purples. Inside the center, veterans laughed and healed and found their way back to life. And in the heart of it all stood two people who'd found each other in a cafeteria, who'd fought corruption together, who'd built something lasting from the ruins of their pain. Sometimes the most important battles aren't fought with weapons. Sometimes they're fought with courage to trust, to heal, to let someone in. Sometimes they begin with a question: can I sit here? And sometimes, if we're very lucky, the answer changes everything.